43rd. Oh, shall I start over? Welcome everyone to the New Mexico Family Advocacy Program 43rd Echo Session. New Mexico FAP is a model of respondent parent representation being implemented in the 13th Second Judicial Districts, as well as now San Juan County 11th Judicial District. And well, I guess Cibola is in the 13th. The program utilizes interdisciplinary teams of lawyers, social workers, and parent mentors working effectively together to provide quality representation and the advocacy and support families need for reunification or other preferred outcomes in the child welfare system. I'm Twyla Hoon. Today, Jen Vieira is running IT for me. Corey Griffith is also online today. And today's topic is from foster parents to resource parents. A couple of quick reminders.
Sorry. I have to join the meeting, so I was trying to do it quietly. I'm sorry.
That's my takeaway. That's focusing on me.
Okay. So a couple quick reminders so that we know who is with us today. Please enter your name and email address in the chat box. Please fill out the post-session survey, which is an integral part of our program's data collection efforts under the federal grant. The survey will only take a few minutes of your time, and Jen will post the link to the survey in the chat box. I thank you in advance for doing the survey. This is eligible for 1.2 general continuing legal education credits for participating attorneys, offered by our sponsor, the Corrine Wolf Center for Child and Family Justice. The CLE form can be found at the NMFAP ECHO Resource Library on the NMFAP website, and Jen will also post that link in the chat. And I'd like to do some introductions. So, but I want to give you some basic background on each of the presenters, and then I'm going to ask some initial questions, but I'm very much hoping that today that you, the participants, will also join in and help us create a rich conversation that allows each participant to step away from today's program with additional knowledge and ideas to strengthen the New Mexico child welfare system and create stronger outcomes. Darlene Dickson will be our one of our presenters today. She and her husband of 10 years, Michael, have been foster parents since July of 2017, and they were named Sandoval County Foster Parent of the Year in 2020. She has 2 biological sons, 1 stepson, and 10 children of her heart, aka foster children. Professionally, she's worked in early childhood education for over 20 years. And with a recent move to Colorado, she's branched out and taken on a role as a mentor coach for kiddos 6 to 18 years of age in the system. As a resource parent, she has been able to see firsthand how important icebreakers and communication between her and children parents are for the success of reunification. We also have Vanessa Paul, who is an independently licensed social worker attached to the New Mexico Family Advocacy Program and works as part of the multidisciplinary team. She has previously worked at CYFD as a family assistance analyst, assisting families in applying for government programs and determining their eligibility. She then transitioned to Sandoval and worked as a permanency planning worker for 2 years while completing her master's in social work at New Mexico Highlands University. And she was able to intern with the in-home services program at CYFD and then with the New Mexico Families Advocacy Program. She has seen firsthand how cases where resource parents and parents have been able to share perspectives and communications have better overall incomes. Finally, we are also joined today by Cantrell Mosley, who has a bachelor's degree in social work and come this July will have worked 20 years for CYFD. Prior to becoming the county office manager in Sandoval County, she worked in Bernalillo County and Sandoval County and in a variety of positions as PPW supervisor, and CSA. She was also engaged in the pilot initiative before NMFAP received the Children's Bureau grant and has been instrumental in the program's success. And if I could have the three presenters unmute, and we'll see if that will work to keep them unmuted. So Vanessa, Cantrell, Darlene, in your experience, what role does the change from foster parent to resource parent attempt to accomplish? And I will actually pick on Cantrell first.
Good morning. I do feel picked on. So I think that the department is working towards more of a co-parenting role with our resource parents and our families. And so I think in saying, instead of foster parent, we're saying that they're a resource parent and someone that could model or assist or support and nurture with them their children. I think that that's the point of that change.
And Vanessa, how are you seeing it from the perspective of being the social worker for the parent? How are you explaining it and how are you utilizing it?
So I think the change from foster to resource parent is really about the relationship building. And I think that it's really not only to support the parents, but also to support the children and help build a lasting relationship. So that way they kind of have a support network for later on, right? And in turn, I think that that really supports family reunification or even another permanency plan. So that's kind of how I've been explaining it to my clients.
And Darlene, would you add anything to that explanation at this time?
I think the explanation is good. In Colorado, I'm still considered a foster parent. In New Mexico, I'm a resource parent. So I'm both still. Honestly, though, for my husband and I, the definition that Cantrell just gave us and everything is how we've always done it. So really, it's a name change for us. It doesn't really change, my role or anything, because that's how we've always done it. So.
And continuing on that vein, Darlene, as a resource parent, has the utilization of icebreakers impacted your interaction or role in the case as a resource parent?
I feel like it has. Anytime we have a new placement, I really, really push for icebreakers because it is a chance for me to get to know biological parents, for biological parents to look at us, and it helps us say, you know what, we are not here to take your role as a parent. We are here to take care of your children and to work with you until they can go back home. So it really starts the foundation of building the relationship with the bio family. It also, it gives a chance for both sides of the table to see that the other one is not the monster in the room. That, we're just trying to work together and do what we can for the best of the kids, and give the kiddos a safe place to be until mom and dad are ready for them to come home.
Vanessa, as far as your work with the parents and explaining the icebreaker and explaining the foster parents' role, how has that tied in?
So I think for my role now as a New Mexico family advocacy worker, I think that the icebreakers are critical for these cases. I think that it provides parents an opportunity to meet with resource parents and to be able to talk about things that their kids like, things that they don't like, maybe allergies that they have, nighttime routines, people that are close to them, right? So maybe they have a phone call with their aunt once a week. And so maintaining that, I think it also humanizes parents, because I think that a lot of times resource parents are very standoffish and they're worried, right? They have fears. And so I think it helps alleviate those fears from the jump and helps start off that communication piece. And I think that once you have that icebreaker, I know for preparing my clients, I would sit with them, talk with them. what do you want to ask, right? Let's come up with a list of things that you want to know about this family. What things do you want them to know about you? And then also too, on the other side is what's appropriate to talk about, right? So we're not going to go in there and start talking about the investigation and specifics related to that. We're keeping it really about the children and you know, the welfare of the kids, and what does that look like? Talking about the providers, who's the PCP, do they like them, things like that, because I think that a lot of times parents feel like they're taken out of the equation, right? So putting them back in, because after all, they know their kids better than anybody else does. So I think that initial meeting is just so very important on both sides.
Thank you. Cantrell, a little more in depth regarding the icebreakers. You know, we've talked about icebreakers can provide an opportunity for communication, but I guess how is CYFD revitalizing the use of icebreakers, and how are the guidelines and boundaries being established by CYFD regarding icebreakers?
So we've actually done a lot. So we have some work groups within CYFD. One of them is the relative care team work group. We do have some relative resource parents on that work group. And providing some feedback about it. This last year, we did a huge survey about people who had participated in them before. We surveyed all of our workers about what worked and what didn't work. And so we created a new program guideline for our workers, really to establish who was going to help I'm going to use the word facilitate them, like a placement worker or the permanency worker who was going to do that, when these icebreakers should be had, you know, should it happen within the first 48 hours of a kid coming into a home? Should it happen when kids go home from resource parents to bio parents, and some of those in between placement changes and transitions? We talked about in there how they're going to be documented and who's going to get that documentation. And then some of those questions, like Vanessa was just saying, what kind of things did we think were absolutely important that everybody needed to be asked? And then how can we facilitate a conversation happening with the resource parents and the families so that they can all kind of talk about things. We've also have some evaluations from that. So there was a survey that workers could provide out, like a link, so that families, resource parents and families could also click on there and give feedback. And then in the last 2 months, we've also had some listening sessions with our supervisors, workers, with resource parents, and with families, bio parents, to hear their feedback about how, calling them individually and saying, how did this feel for you? What worked really well? What kind of things were challenges? What things would you change, or what things would you really encourage us to continue on with? And so we're still gathering some of those evaluation pieces back. The other thing the department is doing is working with the Children's Court Improvement Commission on icebreakers, and how to get the word out that we want respondent counsel, we want judges, we want providers, and we want everybody to really encourage all of our families to participate in these, and reminding our workers this is important, and we want you to help us in facilitating these. And we see they work. And so I think that's the piece.
And just because I'm hoping that we have people from across the state in this today, where should we be seeing the icebreakers happen at this point? Are they statewide now?
Yes, so our entire staff was trained on icebreakers starting in about August and September of last year, as well as visit hosting. And so we've continued that training with them. We're continuing to advocate for that. We had some specific workers in each county that got extra training so that they could go back and help their workers. And then we have it available for all of our workers. So yes, it is statewide. Everybody should ask for them.
And Vanessa, thank you, Cantrell. Vanessa, with regard to the role as a member of the respondent legal team, obviously you're frequently working hand in hand with the attorney and not the program's not available across the state. So in many cases, it's the attorney alone who has to do this part. But what, in your experience of meeting with the team, is being discussed with the client regarding icebreakers, how to prepare? And I can also address that too, if you like.
So I think what's important really is that we're advocating for them, right? So sometimes we're seeing that now. It's not always happening. And so making sure that if you're the attorney or if you're the social worker tied to the case, that you're advocating for these icebreakers, because they do have a great outcome. And I think like what I said earlier, is preparing the client for them, sitting down, talking to them, what should you discuss during this? What should you stay away from, right? And then talking about, even during the icebreaker, about communication with the resource parent. What does that look like? What is the resource parent comfortable with? Are they comfortable with a notebook back and forth in the diaper bag? Are they comfortable with emails, text messages, phone calls, maybe emails, Google Voice? What does that look like on both sides? And then talking to the parent about what's appropriate, right? So if you're given the phone number to the resource parent, it's probably not appropriate to be calling them late at night or, blowing them up and things like that, and talking to them about what the consequences of some of those are, right? So if you're overutilizing some of these things, then it may be taken from you. It's really a privilege to be able to have their phone number, a direct line of communication. So really talking to parents about that up front, so that way they know.
And as an attorney meeting with my client, I know Vanessa, you and I had at least briefly one case. Frequently, we'll start out early on talking about modeling as a team behavior, but also then talking clearly with our clients about boundaries, about guidelines, about when and where might be the most appropriate time to express angst, because these are highly emotional cases and there is angst, but we in theory hope that we can have conversations that allow both any venting to occur in an environment that's safe, but where we have an opportunity to meet with a resource parent like Darlene, that can be a more useful and functional conversation. Darlene, from the perspective of the resource parent, what do you find most helpful, and how do you find your participation most useful in the icebreakers?
So we've done the gamut of all the things that Vanessa said. We at one point, for one family, we added an extra line to a cell phone line specifically just for that. And we let parents know right up front, here's the number, you can call between these specific hours. And then during those hours, we had the phone on, the rest of the time it was off. So if they blew the phone up, yay, they got voicemail. We've done email. Currently, we have a couple of brothers in our home. We email, we have let mom know she is welcome to email as much as she wants to. We've also set up a PO box specifically for the kiddos to write letters. Mom can write letters, grandma can write letters, just to keep those communications open. And those, all of them, I think, as a foster resource parent, I think you really just have to kind of go case by case and see what works. But how I've seen each of those things work is it really, when you walk into an icebreaker room, tensions are high on both sides. As a bio family, as the foster / resource family, because nobody knows what to expect. On my side of the table, I know that the child was taken out of the home for whatever unsafe reasons. I may have details, I may not. Not sure, okay, well, if it was physical reasons, how's my safety going to be affected in that? And on their side of the table, they come in and we are seen as the bad guys that took their kid away, that wants to keep their kids away from them. And so being able to build the foundation and just have a real conversation about this is who we are. What do you want us? Are there things that we can do in our home that you've done to maintain consistency for your child? Those kind of things. It really just kind of breaks that wall down with parents and really turns both sides of the table to see, you know what, we're all human and we're just one choice away from a bad choice. And none of us are exempt from that. And so how can I best support you and how can you best support me? And just talking through those type of things.
So would it be fair to say that there's several levels of teamwork, as it were, going on, both you with CYFD, but you are also trying to create the role for the resource parent as, I want to help, I want to see you succeed, I'm not here to be a barrier?
Absolutely. As part of, I don't know if y'all know this, as part of when we sign on the dotted line to be a foster resource parent, we have a list of things that we're agreeing to. And yes, I need to follow what the department needs me to do on their side of it. But I also, part of me saying I'm willing to do this is me saying I'm willing to do what I can to help reunify this child with his family. And I cannot do that effectively if I don't even know what's going, you know, what mom wants for her kiddos or dad wants for his kiddos. You know, I feel disabled if I can't hear from them on some of these things, you know, our bedtime routine, our all of these kinds of things, you know, are even, I've even asked like holiday traditions so that we can keep consistency for these kiddos as much as possible. But if we don't take the time to set our big bad selves aside and look at them as humans and get to know them, we can't build those blocks to make this a successful thing for anybody.
And a question from Kristen Conley. I'm going to go ahead and insert. Are resource parents for the youngest kids still expecting to adopt? And I'm going to start with Cantrell as far as addressing, poor Cantrell, as far as addressing, in my earlier days, I think that used to be called more of a concurrent planning, which I believe that terminology is no longer in play. But as far as when CYFD is selecting resource parents now, what is the viewpoint on resource parents looking to adopt younger children, and that's why they want to be a resource parent?
So Kristen, our messaging right now to all of those who are inquiring about becoming resource parents is that they're going to be resource parents. We're not an adoption agency, and so we are not really licensing homes that are here to adopt. I do have to say that I think some of those changes came, Darlene, I think came at one point to be that a relative resource parent and to adopt. And she's had, I think it's 5 families come through her home that she's reunified those kids with those parents and making that co-parenting and making those decisions to, even when there's a newborn in her home, that, you know, how do I help and support mom going through this rough time in her life to be a guardian or something right now so that I can support her even 10 years down the road. So our messaging right now, Kristen, is no, they're not. And I think that I have to say more right now, we're looking at relatives, placing kids with relatives. So that's not something. And I think for the whole time I've been part of CYFD, our messaging has been that we would like to have those open doors. And I say open adoption or open guardianship or something, so that it's not something that's permanent and we don't know who family is, but really relatives are where we're moving towards.
I want to bounce off of that, and Darlene, Cantrell had said, about their messaging, but that you, when you originally came in, were seeking to be a relative foster parent and adopt. How did and what did the messaging say to you that had you instead become one of, 2020 foster parent for Sandoval, but also in many cases, a resource support, and it sounds like a lot of communication with the parents of the children in your home?
So for me, that would be our very first case. We absolutely came into the fostering thing. We had a failed private adoption that broke us to no degree. Sorry, I still get emotional about that little girl. We have very good relationship with her and her father. They were reunited. It's all a good thing. But in the final hearing that we had for her, the judge that we had really encouraged us to take some time to heal and then to consider foster care. And so we're like, great, we're going to do foster care. We're going to get a baby. We're going to adopt. We're going to close our license and we're going to have our happy little family. And that very much did not happen. And it's okay. Our first little guy completely changed us. And the value that we saw in him needing connection with his parents is what changed us. That I could go on and on forever. That little boy grew us so much, as have all the rest of our kiddos in different ways. But that was really the game changer for us, because we saw his need for connection with mom and dad. Whether he, even though he could not even be with them at the time, we saw that that was necessary and that we needed to do everything we could to make that happen. And then in the end, if it didn't work, we were still there to take him and keep him, adopt him, or whatever that looked like. But he reunited with his family and they're doing good. We all of our children that have reunified, which has been all of them except for our current ones, we still have very strong relationships with. So our first little guy that I was just talking to had a birthday in March, and his mom texted me and wanted to know when we could come and see him and do his birthday with them. Unfortunately, with everything in our world going on at that time, that didn't work out. But I still have her phone number. I actually went and found it yesterday because I was just curious how they were doing and stuff. And so I still have those connections with all of our kids and their parents, because that's why we do what we do, because they need to be with their families as much as possible, because that's their family. And then if, we're called on to take them longer term, then here we are, and we'll do that and do what we can to continue keeping connection with their families.
And Jim, I'm going to go more in depth in your question in just a moment, but Darlene, while I'm still speaking to you, as far as this role as resource parent, did you ever feel that it excluded you from the option of adoption?
I think that we excluded ourselves because of the importance that we see that the kiddos need to be with their families. Now, would we do that? Absolutely, hands down. If that is what is determined in the best interest of the kiddos, absolutely, we would still do that.
And in your current case, I know that you've talked about it not being at reunification at this point in time. Is there a permanency plan in place at this time that you're aware of? And I'm not trying to go outside of your comfort zone there.
There is. The very cool thing, I guess you could say, with that, is the mom is 100% on board with it, and we are in process of building a very good relationship with her so that we can maintain family ties, whatever direction this ends up going. So, and that means both ways, you know, eventually if these boys go home, we'll still be that resource for her and for them. And if they end up staying with us, we still have her and connection to her.
And Vanessa, I would like to just continue that line of thought, though, from the perspective of working with the parent, that message change. How are you approaching it in your teams? And what do you think is the most effective approach?
I think the most effective approach is really talking to parents about building a relationship with the foster parents, right? With the resource parents, and talking about good communication with them so that way they can have something lasting. And I think when you really think about it from the child's perspective, right, that when they see a forefront of both my resource family and my parents getting along, they don't have to choose between resource parents and their parents, right? They're all working together. And I think the commonality is for the good of the child. And so explaining that to parents and letting them know these people are not here to take your role from you, right? And letting them know exactly what Control was talking about how resource parents are now selected, because I think that's a really important piece to tell our own parents, right? So that way they know that these people are not in it just to adopt. Because that is how it used to be. You know, people would come in and they'd say, okay, I'm looking to adopt a baby only, you know, between the ages of 0 and 2. And so I'm glad that CYFD is no longer, you know, really focusing on that piece and is really focusing on the reunification and building a resource for the bio parents, because that's important. So explaining it to parents from that perspective is very important, I think. But it all goes down to that communication piece, right? Is having that initial icebreaker with them so that way that communication can start, because it has to start somewhere. And so being able to have parents come to soccer games, right, and cheer on their, and can you imagine the child, how awesome that would be to see your resource family sitting right next to your parents cheering you on in the stands, things like that. Having going to, you know, IEPs together, going to parent teacher conferences, school plays, all these things that they can do together, and really having the parents utilize the resource parents as a support for them, in whatever capacity that looks like. You know, I know with Darlene, it looked a lot different for her than it is for some, but getting it to that point for other resource parents, because I think that once they've done it, then it's going to be fine after that, right? It's that initial change and getting even the older foster parents who've been there for years. That's going to be the hard piece, is getting their mindset to change, because they've done it a certain way for so long. So really incorporating now bio parents might be kind of scary to them, but having that icebreaker to show, you know, these are normal human beings just like you. So yeah.
And Darlene, on that same communication aspect, in your experience, is that communication helpful, especially when discussing with the parents, either things to celebrate or as you'd mentioned to me yesterday, challenges sometimes that might arise in the child's life? How does that work for you?
For us, well, I can give you a quick example without too much detail. We had an incident with our 9-year-old last week, having some behaviors that we had talked to him, and we said, you know, we're working with your mom. She is your mom. Anytime there's big things, now we're not talking about little things like you talked back to me or you slammed the door because you were mad. We're talking big things, hurting himself, hurting other people, you know, big things. We're going to have to email her and let her know. He did not want that to happen because he was worried he'd be in really big trouble. And so we had the opportunity to explain to him, it's not about getting you in trouble, but she's your mom and she needs to know what's going on. And we talked to him, not just the bad things. When you make a bad choice, it's not just about that. It's about when you get up and you help your brother pick up his toys, or when you help the kid at school who fell on the playground get inside to clean up his scraped knee, or, all these other things that you're doing. And so, of course, because it was the first incident, he was very nervous about letting mom know, but she handled it amazingly. She sent me an email back, thanks for letting me know. I had asked her, what kinds of things would you do if he was with you right now and this had happened? What would you do at home? And so she gave me a couple things that I said, those are perfect. I hadn't even thought of. I raised 2 kids. I should have thought of these things. I didn't. And so, it was a chance for him to see that his mom loves him and we love him. And we are going to work together and do what's best for him in the poor choices and in the good choices. And it's really had a huge impact on him to see that camaraderie and that, just having us all on the same page, and to see that mom's not going to yell at you because you made a mistake. She's going to talk to you about it and we're going to move on. But she has the right to do that in the good and in the poor choices.
Thank you. And Vanessa, on that same topic though, as far as if you and I are on a team with a parent, obviously we want to have pre-spoken with our client, or if I'm a solo attorney without a social worker assistance, talk to my client about how better to respond or how better to interact in those communications.
Yes. So, parents want to be a part of those conversations. They want to hear the good stuff, right? They also want to hear the bad stuff. They want to know what's going on in their child's life. And I think, with resource parents, including parents in that's a big deal. And I would love to see that happening more often, because parents do want that. They want to have that communication and see those things. And I think just continuing to, encourage that. And if you're a social worker on the case, when you see that, tell, CYFD, the PPW, mom likes that. If your client really is liking that, let them know, so that way it can happen more. And maybe even that becomes, opens the door for more communication. But I think it's important that we're including bio parents in everything, because that is their kid, right?
Thank you. Cantrell, I want to loop back to Jim's question. He had asked in the chat, does that mean that initially the child is placed with the family solely as foster parent, but as time passes and no family member emerges, the foster family can become an adoptive family? Or if you sign up as a foster parent, are you irrevocably excluded from adopting? And I'm going to go ahead and switch that to the mindset of the resource parent, but if you could address that.
So I want you to know that my perspective is that of we're here to reunify families. So absolutely, all of our resource parents start off as resource parents. Our plan starts off with reunification. All of them do. So no parent, no child is placed in a home with a plan to adopt ever. And that's always been, that's in statute, that's in children's code, like that's what we want. And that's what, as Darlene said, that's what we talk with foster parents, our resource parents about. I don't think it excludes them, but I hoping that we don't get to that place in our cases, and that we are looking for relatives, and that we are, sending kiddos home, because that's important. But no, that doesn't exclude them. And those are ongoing conversations that we will be having almost monthly about how have we assessed all of the relatives, and we'll be doing that every 30 days, and really talking about how, how we are doing those reunification. And sorry, Kristen, I saw yours. I'm going to tell you, in my career, that is very, very rare. And although safe haven, right? Although safe haven babies come, those are safe haven babies from a criminal case, not necessarily from us working towards reunifying them with the family that we had. Like, I think that that's important to say, because we do tell our resource parents those things. That doesn't exclude us from really working towards reunifying them or finding them their relatives.
And taking into, Darlene and Vanessa both addressed the uniform consequences resource approach between the resource parent and the parent. In the trainings that you do with new resource parents or with resource parents that have already been doing this for a while, have you changed that approach as far as trying to encourage that level of uniform collaboration?
I think that's the new thing with our Quality Parent Initiative with QPI, is really pushing that and showing people that this is important. I think since we've started having visit hosting, I know that some of the time when Darlene has had the opportunity to do that with parents, taking kiddos to like one of our inpatient programs and doing visits with parents there, she's got an opportunity to talk to parents about, this is what's worked and this wasn't, and having that, kiddo runs back and forth between the two of them, and it's not a bad thing. So icebreakers help us talk about visit hosting and help us improve some of those. When Vanessa said about, them coming to the game and seeing everybody together, it's another visit hosting opportunity for us. Can aunties and them come to the flag football game? Because that's what Darlene and them had, and how awesome was that? And even getting to say goodbye at the end, and could mom bring the snack for the snack day or something like that? Those are things that we are encouraging for visit hosting, not just to talk about in icebreakers, and not just to include this QPI process and those champions.
As I mentioned before, I'm hoping that we have more statewide participants today. But in general, just for this message, making sure it gets out there. But I can, from personal experience, when I've worked in other districts, I've not always seen that openness to cooperation, collaboration between the foster parent and the resource from the resource parent and the parent. So as far as the Quality Parenting Initiative rolling out statewide, how is CYFD seeking to make sure that message gets expressed, and how can attorneys and attorney and parent teams make sure it's happening?
I'm going to say it's just continuing to encourage. We are getting that message out. Darlene is actually someone that we talked about being a champion for that, because she's done that and had that opportunity with some of our parents. So I think those are new things, right? Just had a big kickoff this summer, and we're just getting those pieces out. We are revamping our whole training for our resource parents. And so that's something that we're adding in there about what that's going to look like. But it's also us as workers, us telling these resource parents and telling, families that we're working with, we want you to engage with each other. We want you to do this. And I think now that we're working towards a lot of relatives, that's grandma really showing her daughter, this is how I'm supporting you. This is auntie taking on and showing her sister, I want to show you these parenting pieces, and I want you to be involved in Christmas, and I want you to come for dinner every weekend and participate with us. And so it's a lot easier when it's those relatives. And that's another reason we're really pushing relative placements. And I know in a lot of the cases that Darlene has had, it's how do we engage those relatives when they couldn't be a placement. Darlene worked with a grandma because grandma lived somewhere else with people. She wasn't able to take the kids into her home, but she came and helped transport the kiddo to therapy every week with Darlene to ease Darlene's burden and to get the kiddo to therapy. And her and grandma worked together, not just her and mom and dad, right? It was them too. And so I think it's talking about those and encouraging those. I would say as respondent counsel or as judges or others, it's you asking those questions at FCMs. Have you talked to the relatives and are they able to do other things for them? It's pushing us to ask those questions. Have you done the icebreaker? Have you talked about visit hosting? Have you talked about how parents and them can communicate? Is there an email address they can utilize? Is there a phone number that you're willing to provide to them? And if respondent counsel talks with parents, and I think we're unique in Sandoval County. I see Sherry on here, but Sherry's gotten a chance to be a guardian ad litem, a youth attorney, and a respondent counsel. So understanding that she's had those different roles when talking with bio parents and saying, I've been a GAL, let me tell you what some of their worries are for your kiddos. And let me talk to you about what I would share with them and what I would ask and how I would do that in different perspectives. I think that's something that's amazing that we get to do in Sandoval County. And so our respondent counsel does that. They ask at every single FCM, is there a visit host? Can we do it? They ask at the IPAC, have you done this? Have there been an icebreaker? And I think it's just ingrained now that they do that. And so we already know, our investigative team knows, I better have asked those questions beforehand. So I think that those are what pushes us. And I say that a lot is I think that respondent counsel and judges push us to make some of those changes and anticipate some of those things.
Thank you. Vanessa, taking off of the relative experience, in your experience, how can the icebreaker play a role in relative resource care placements? I mean, there's, the argument, well, that's a relative, so of course they already know each other. So what would you say would be a reason for discussing the importance of that icebreaker still?
So I think that the icebreakers are important in relative placements because I think it also is a way to get parents engaged again, right, with their family, and start maybe it hasn't been a good relationship in the past, and working on that, right, for the child, but also to reset boundaries. If the relative is going to be maybe a visit host, there has to be boundaries in place, right? They have to be able to shut the visit down if parents are being inappropriate. And so an icebreaker gives the opportunity for, those boundaries to be talked about from the get-go. And so that way, parents also can talk about, those same routines yet again, even with grandma, right? Because I know I've seen in cases where relatives, it can be challenging for parents with relatives, right? Sometimes those are some of the harder cases. So having an icebreaker to talk about that from the jump is important for both sides, for resource parents and parents, because I think the bottom line is that we got to really think about the child, right? That's parents' main focus. So yeah.
And Vanessa, I don't recall if it was any of my work with you, but I know at least some of the social workers I've worked with, we've had discussions with the parent also about the fact that the rules apply even if it's a relative resource parent. And so CYFD is doing the same training, and we need to communicate in our attempts to collaborate. And if there are difficulties, raise them so that it's known. Kentrell, in your experience, is that useful? And what else would you recommend that the parent team be looking at, making sure the parents know when it's a relative placement?
I think those were all good things. I know right now me and Camille are working on a case where it's grandma and the mom, it's her mother-in-law. And so those things, I agree with those things. I don't know that I I think some of those things we talked about and how to get a visit host and having those discussions and making sure that we support them and support parents, right? We don't want to just make it sound like as soon as they tell us things are bad, we're changing this. We don't want that. It's listening. And I actually have to say some of it is mediation. When parents are Darlene, sorry, I'm going to pick on you, have had like issues during visits, it wasn't us just stopping them and them stopping communication. It was us coming back to the table together, right, as a co-parenting team and saying, okay, this happened. How will we make sure this doesn't happen again? Or here's some changes that we'd like to make, or this is really doing well. Could we do more of this? So I think it's that communication piece.
Thank you. What about those situations, and I'm gonna ask this to the group, but before I do that, I'd also love if there's any other questions, I mean, please either in the chat or raise your hand. I was serious, I would love to have this conversation enriched with, you know, we've got a great opportunity here of a resource parent, CYFD, and a social worker. Yes, Marianne.
Okay, so I always have stupid questions. So the thing that kind of gets me always, which I don't know if anybody can avoid, but I always wonder if it influences the children's ultimate decision, because, and you know, Miss Dickson is really a rarity. I've never heard anybody talk like her in my entire life. So, so this is really new movement. But let's face it, there are still parents, no matter, I don't care what you call them, resource parents, foster parents, that still, if things don't work out with the parents, of course they would be interested in adopting. I mean, that is still there. It's part of the system. But what bothers me is, do you think that it affects a child's viewpoint of where they want to be when they start calling foster parents mom and dad? I know my clients get extremely upset about that. So my question is that reflecting a stronger relationship with the, no matter what we call them, foster parents, resource parents? That happens a lot, that because the children live with those people. I don't know if that has come up, or you found that it's interfered, or if that's been downplayed. But I think that albeit a small word, represents a larger indication perhaps of some sort of, oh, I hate to use the word bonding, well, but relationship. So I'm just throwing it out there because it's I've been thinking about it for years.
So I want to actually move to Darlene first, because I know that she's had some experience with that. So Darlene.
So in our cases, I've had one parent, a mother, that was upset that her child called me mom. One of the very, very first things that we do when we get a new placement is we tell the kids, you can call me Miss Darlene, you can call me mom, you can call me auntie, you can call me anything you want except a bad word. And we let them name us whatever they're going to name us. We don't force them to call us mom, dad, whatever. In all of our cases, our names have varied. We had our first little guy, he would call me mom, and he called his mom by her first name. And it really was because of the bond that he and I had built, because he was with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that was the bond he needed. So it gave me and mom an opportunity to talk. And what I did, I just said, hey, listen, I am not trying to be his mom. I'm trying to take care of him the best I can until he can come back to you. I can teach him to call me something else if you would like. It took her a little bit. She said, no, because that's his choice, let him do it. And by the end of it, and still now, when her and I are together, he calls me mom, he calls her Jennifer. It's just the way he has always been. We found an even playing field and said, where she understood that's not what, I'm not here to take the mom role, but we can do it together. And when it's time for him to go home, it's all on you, and I'm here to support you however I can. So.
Thank you. I do need to give a 5-minute warning, but I then want to turn to Vanessa and ask her similarly on that same legal team approach, or just an attorney having to approach it on their own. What kind of conversations have we had or can we have with the parent regarding that mom-dad dichotomy?
Well, I think it's important for us as a social worker or the respondent attorney to listen to what our parents are telling us, right? So if they're saying that they don't like that the child is calling the resource parent mom or dad, it's our job to bring that up, right? And see, because maybe it makes them uncomfortable, or maybe where they're doing a bonding study or something like that. And I think it's really important that we say exactly what it is that our clients want, right? Whether it happens or not, but also to explaining the other side of it as to why it's happening, like Darlene said, and giving them an opportunity to talk to the resource parent about it and see what they think. But as far as advocating, it is our job to advocate for them, right, on whatever it is that they're wanting. So really remembering that, but also taking the piece with the resource parent and allowing them to communicate about it and see if they can find a common ground, right, for that. But I do know that it does hurt parents a lot to see their child call the resource parent mom or dad, or so, yeah.
And actually, I'll answer out loud now. The 5-minute warning is for those who have 1 o'clock court. I don't want to make anybody late. But no, Jim, we are definitely going still. Vanessa, tying into that, I know that I've had communications with my clients, and I've also been on the GAL role of that, and seen that there are sometimes ways to make sure that the parent understands that we also want to make sure that the child is comfortable in both homes, that we want our children in homes where they feel comfortable and are not being treated as a paycheck, as it were. Would you like to, could you add anything to that?
So I think going back to kind of what you were talking about too, with the the calling of the mom and things like that, I just wanted to add to that. I think it's important that, we also work with our parents. They work with their children during the visit, right? To even say like, I'm your mom, like and really distinguishing that if it's bothering them that much, like, and I think that if they talk to the resource parent about it, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Darlene, but I think that you would probably be willing to make that adjustment, right? If it was bothering a parent that much. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. What was your other question, Twyla?
I no longer remember, so thank you. We'll go ahead and keep moving. I do want to circle back. Jim had asked in the chat. I'm not going to read it word for word, but sorry, Jim. It's long and it already scrolled upwards. But as far as communications with the resource parent, in Jim's experience, there's often been parts of time where in the state resource parents have been left in the dark. How is the department approaching that? And is that something that is trying to change? And Jim, I hope that gets close enough to your point. Okay.
Are you asking me?
Yes, sorry, Kentrell.
I think it's this is so hard for me because I'm thinking like we have like we've really encouraged workers to invite foster parents to family-centered meetings. We have a lot of safeguards in place for them to be invited and to participate in those things. We've changed a lot of the way we do home visits so that our home visit forms really advocate and talk about, do you have a copy of the treatment plan for the child? And do you have things that you would want us to add to that so that they don't feel in the dark? Asking them to come and participate in visit hosting, you know, being in part of those icebreakers so they meet the parents and they're involved with them. I think, you know, Darlene just said that about talking to the mom and having this co-parenting piece. I feel as CYFD, I was kind of left out of that. Like, I don't know that conversation happened, but do I need to? Do I need to be a part of those little things? No. So I'm surprised to hear that foster parent or resource parents are still feeling like they're in the dark, because we've made so many avenues to include them and for them to participate, especially when it's relatives. I know we're having them come to court and sit with parents as part of their support team. We're doing those circle of supports and asking, you know, could we include the resource parent as part of that, so that, you know, when kiddos go home, you're still talking to them. I think those are all the things we're doing as a department to do that. And I feel like that's not new things, right? I've been here for 20 years. I started way back when, and those are not new things that I've ever done. Those are things that we've done all through that time. I even feel like that was encouraged, right? I'm going to pull Vanessa into her PPW role for 2 seconds, but I mean, we encourage that. We tell them, and I'm hoping that as a New Mexico FAP worker and those who are social workers are doing that are saying, you have a right to be heard in those hearings. You have a right to sit at the table at those FCMs. Let's encourage you to do that.
And just to take a little bit more into Jim's question, Kentrell, I know that your district, you know, is your district, and I know Jim's practiced in other districts. I have, and others have, but this is not just a Sandoval Albuquerque thing. This is statewide, correct?
Yes.
And so as an attorney, if I'm in court with my client and I feel that some of this is not perhaps edged into the area I'm working in, I can raise it also, correct?
Yeah.
So, and I know that trainings have been done with the judges also regarding icebreakers. But Darlene, as far as the tagging you as the in the dark, have you felt there's been a change in communication, or how have you experienced this?
So I would have to say that I've not ever felt in the dark. I know there are things that, yes, I would like to know the details that I can't know. That's probably better for me not to know. Those kinds of things, yes, left in the dark, absolutely. But there's a reason for that, and I understand that. But from Sandoval County, I will sing their praises from the rooftops, and not just because they're on screen with us. We've had very good relationship with all of our workers, all of the staff. My network of resource parents in New Mexico, I've not really had anybody share any complaints of, well, I didn't even know this was going on. I found out because I did my own research, or, you know, whatever, where they felt left in the dark. So I really feel like Sandoval County does do a very good job at communicating what they can, because obviously there are things that cannot and should not be communicated. But it also empowers us, like Kentrell said, to have those little minutia conversations with mom that we don't necessarily have to say, hey, Kentrell, this happened, you know, because they trust that we're doing our job, and they're supporting us in doing our job. So I personally can't really speak to being left in the dark.
And I'm going to, thank you. I'm going to loop in Diana and Anna Maria's Luna's answer about, Diana, you'd asked about if the resource parents have the right to be in the hearing, which they absolutely do. And And Anna Marie, you did chime in on that, that yes, they do. And that getting the notices, the hearings is a problem and it's being worked on. I know from my personal experience as a GAL, I would frequently, reach out to foster parents about doing a visit prior to court and have them sometimes be like, what court? And as a guardian ad litem, I was also able to help with that whole notice component. But the flip side of that, Vanessa, as far as preparing our parents for the foster parents being in court, how have you seen that most successfully done? Our resource parents, sorry, still working on the language change.
Well, I think it goes back to that relationship building, right? So if they have a good relationship, then parents are not going to be, they're not going to battle the resource parents coming into the court hearing. However, I have seen in cases where maybe resource parents are not supportive of reunification, and resource parents are given the opportunity to talk at court hearings. And so sometimes they go up there and, they say some not so nice things, or that they want to, they're hoping to maybe adopt the child, or things like that. So I think depending on where you are in the case, having those conversations of what that looks like with your parent, right? So going over that court report, so that way they know what to expect for court next week, and talking about that, or talking about instances that maybe happened at during a visit, right? Maybe the visit host is resource parents. And I do want to mention too, that if parents do not want a relative to be, or the resource parent to be the visit host, then we need to make sure that we're advocating for that to not happen, right? So sometimes we have seen sabotaging happening in cases with relatives, or just, non-relative resource parents. And so I think it's important that we're advocating for what our parents want. So if they're saying, hey, I'd rather not have my mother supervise these visits, then we need to make sure that we are advocating that to the PPW, and taking it up the chain if we have to, because, parents have to be comfortable for these visits as well. So.
And Diana, going back to your additional about the confidentiality of parents' medical conditions and other things, it's, in my honest opinion, could be a class all on its own. I can tell you in my personal experience, I've had interveners, foster parents, relatives, and non-relatives, where I've specifically, as the parents' attorney, asked for the court order to reflect that the material that the interveners themselves have the right to does not include my client's medical records, test results, etc. And in general, actually overall, I don't think I've ever had a court disagree with me on that, and made it very clear to the intervener's attorney, if there was one, that there are some communications that are still privileged, and that the interveners are not intervened to that extent. And there is, as far as in the court hearing itself, sometimes there is what I would consider privileged information discussed. As a advocate for my parent, I might try to limit the nature of those conversations in that open court setting, but sometimes stuff does come out, and the resource parents do hear it. I can object, I can try to hear, but I have seen situations where somebody else speaks up and starts saying something, and I'm trying to do damage control. Cantrell, Vanessa, or Darlene, do you have anything to add to that? Yes, things cannot be unheard. All you can do is try to prepare and be ready to react.
I think we have some of our respondents counsel that really focus and keep us on track for that, right? We have respond counsel that says foster parents have a right to be heard and not to hear everything. Can they come in for the beginning portion? Can they come in at the end? And we've talked with our resource parents about that. I want you to know there's some things that aren't going to be said in here. That's great. It's the same thing that's happened with kids in court. right? We've had youth and everybody go in and they don't want everybody to hear the whole thing. And so they step out for a little bit or come back in. Those are things that we do in hearings. We have resource parents who come to adjudications and they sit out for the adjudication portion and come in for the disposition portion, right? It's just different all around. I wanted to say one other thing, Twila, I know we just have like a couple minutes and I have to really jet off right away, but I think that one of the things about the calling mom and calling dad and stuff that I've really noticed is when parents and kiddos are together and they hear what other people call them, kids will start calling the resource parents those things. So if the child if the mom didn't say anything about it and she's calling Darlene, or she's calling her auntie right along with the kids, they pick up on that. I think having more relative resource parents has also cut down on that mom and dad thing. But I get sad when my kids call their teacher mom because they've been with her so often. And so I think that's not something that's, just to those in foster care. That happens other times. We have aunties who kids call them mom because that's who's been there more, and all their cousins call them mom too. So I think it's us encouraging those continued conversations and having the resource parent model and mentor. Darlene's also mentored other resource parents who are having trouble doing this. And so she's been able to talk with them at some of our support groups or some of our foster parent forums, or just when they've called and said, I do not want to have anything to do with this mom. How are you doing this? She's been able to say, we have challenges. It's not always perfect. And here's what I would suggest you do. And here's how we could handle that together as a resource parent. So in Sandoval County, we've also had our resource parents talk to one another about what this messaging looks like.
Thank you. I want to circle back briefly, Kristen, to you, but one more reminder, please do take the survey. Please do utilize the CLE form if you're an attorney seeking CLE credits. Kristen, I wanted to go ahead and state it. Most people probably saw it in the chat, but just in case, because chat's going kind of fast. Resource parents have a right to be heard, not to hear all, is Kristen's sum up, which is 100% accurate in my opinion. And I have had situations where I've told the court that, Your Honor, before we address this section, I am going to ask that grandmother, maternal grandmother, I represent paternal, not be in the courtroom for this aspect. She does not have a right to this privileged information. I agree, the best way to do it is a motion in limine, so that you have a record. Sometimes you can do it orally, but I think that we go back to the law school rule of thumb, which is know your judges. If you don't know your judge that you're appearing in front of, if it's a new time, reach out to your colleagues and get some feedback, because I know some judges want everything in writing. Other judges, are more fine with the open court motion at the beginning of the hearing. And I thought I saw another question and I've now lost it in the chat, so I apologize. What other questions are there? I know Miss Cantrell, Miss Mosley has to jump. And I really appreciate her giving us this afternoon. I stole her from something else, but I think Vanessa and Darlene have a few more minutes. So if we have questions, and Anna Marie Luna's clarification sent to the judges will be very helpful. Jim put in the chat. So I saw a hand and now I don't see the hand anymore. Mary Ann.
Just a real fast question. Is the link sent to the email? Because I don't know how to copy it off the chat.
It may be attached, but you can actually click on it in the chat and it should open in a new web page.
It does, yeah.
Oh, I can just click on it and the web page will stay there? Okay.
Yeah. So
Great, thank you. That was all. I appreciate it.
and if people are raising just their hand, I can't see most of the screens. So either if they want to use the electronic hand or anybody have questions they want to chime out with, now's the time. Anne Marie. I think I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you, Twyla. I really appreciate you all putting this on. It was really awesome. And I just want to, I don't know if Cantrell's still here, but just want to let Cantrell know that she did a really great job. Thanks, also thank Ms. Dickson for her work with our families and our children. I just wish I could bottle you up and have you talk to all our other resource parents, because I think it would be really helpful for them to hear about how positive your experiences have been.
Yeah, Cantrell, Darlene, Vanessa, I really appreciate all of your work and all of your willingness to allow me to, as some people would say, give you the third degree cross exam. But I really do appreciate all of the insight. And Anna Marie, I would say that I think it was you and I and maybe a couple other people were talking about the idea of the cafes. I think Darlene would be a beautiful cafe host. I think this team of Darlene, Vanessa, and Cantrell is wonderful and would also be a great cafe host. Any other questions at this time? And if I missed something in the chat, I apologize. I'm trying to watch it.
Or hang up to play it.
So, anything? Because I'll keep talking, but otherwise, that's what we've got. And we would love and appreciate any feedback and where else these sessions. I know that Corey generally says and asks, please make suggestions for other trainings. Corrine Wolf has been absolutely wonderful about assisting not just New Mexico FAP, but all of our attorneys across the state. And I know that they're always eager to hear about opportunities that they might be able to assist with. As Kristen probably goes, Twyla, why are you giving me more work? But overall, I mean, it is change in some ways, and in some ways, for some districts, it's not a lot of change. But we, as the attorneys representing parents and representing children and youth, we can be a part of the change and make sure that we are also raising it and asking about it, and not just CYFD's burden, but it's also our duty to bring it to the court's attention. And otherwise, that's all I've got. Unless there's any other questions. Vanessa, do you have anything to add, or Darlene?
I don't.
The only thing that comes to mind when y'all were talking about foster resource parents in court, from our side of it, we have been invited into every court hearing except for adjudication. And there have been times when we were dismissed from the courtroom because of confidential information. We also signed the agreement that we keep all things per case confidential. But then there has been times that we were asked to go ahead and leave the courtroom because mom was uncomfortable with information that was going to be shared, or dad. And you know what, as a foster resource parent, whatever you want to call me, that was not an issue for us, because if I don't need to hear it, the kiddos that I brought to court don't need to hear it either. So that's never been an issue. And I invite people to ask me to leave for some things. So, but thank you, everyone. This has been awesome to do. So thanks for inviting me on this panel.
Thank you. I really appreciate the both of you, and I'm keeping your contact information.
Absolutely.
And thank you for letting me join you today, because I kind of butted myself in. Kristen, real quick, yes, no right to notice for adjudication disposition. That I think it needs to be said also. So Excellent. Well, then everybody, please have a great afternoon. Please do your surveys. Please do your CLEs, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, Darlene. Great job. And Twyla, thank you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Darlene. I actually will hope to get to talk to you again in the future.